Hello and welcome to the Cynic Weekly. I'm your host, Christopher Gallagher, and today we've got a packed podcast in which we're going to discuss and dissect all the news and events that's happened in the world of Glasgow Celtic over the last week or so. I am delighted to say I'm joined by one of the best panels in the business. Let's start to my right hand side. It's the usual host, but I'm giving him time to vent and allowing him to have his own voice tonight. It's our good friend Barry Gallagher. Hello Barry, how are you, sir?
Very well, thanks. I say very well in everything that isn't Celtic, which is ideal for a Celtic podcast, but I think the last week has probably been unbelievable. Like, you wouldn't have imagined, like, not even, and we were speaking of Gall, that we are extreme in shite bags, but I don't think even in the depths of despair you could have predicted what was going to happen in this past week or so. So looking forward to getting into it, and there's a lot of anger there.
Just in future, I'm just looking for a hi. Yeah, I'm doing well. Stuart Dickens also here. Hi Stuart, how are you?
Hi Chris, I'm good.
Good stuff. Thank you, Stuart. There you go. Barry's he's now melded to the host and see. I'm only joking, Barry. Good points. So it's been a roller coaster. I was going to say it's a roller coaster. It's not really. It's been quite just lower coaster. Like the Ghost Train. Brilliant. It's been a tough week, Stu.
Yeah, I was probably going to make an off-colour joke about roller coasters there, but I'll leave it.
What would an off-colour joke about roller coaster?
I was going to say about that one that broke, but I think someone they got hurt. It's not funny.
Aye, let's go on.
We'll move on. Yeah, I kind of agree with Barry. It's that classic expectations were low, but holy fuck. Like, I think when we spoke last week, I think that probably would have been just before all the Dahlberg stuff came out. And I feel like going into the last few days of the window, once that story dropped, you were like, right, this has been extremely suboptimal the way this has gone, but that's something that you can hang on to.
Yeah.
And I think that, just kind of felt like it was a case that they're going to go back around some of these targets that we've kind of been linked with for most of the summer. Pony up. They're going to have to pay more than they would have liked to, but that's the nature of it because we need this squad. And even to compete at Europa League level, we just don't have a sufficient number of players and positions. And then from that kind of thought, it just became like a slow-moving car crash where the Ida situation, the Yang situation, the scramble of the last few hours of the window with, player after player dropping off, and the shambles that even after the window's closed, you've got another full day where you're sort of scraping about in the bargain bin. And I think it's about as grim as it gets, but I do think that there will be positives to come out of it, and I think that it might take a few weeks for the dust to settle from it, because normally I think we were excited about the window closing just so you can sort of see where you have, sift through it and get ready for the football. But I think that it's been so seismically bad that it is hopefully going to enact a bit of change in around the way that the club functions, because it's so bad that it can't continue. So yeah, much to dig into, but just an insane week that none of us could have predicted.
Yeah, I think it's, in one of the kind of chats we're in, Barry, when we were kind of being really, before the window closed, we were being quite critical, and Stuart rightly put in, look, it's a bit of a pain, and obviously I'd like things to be done better, but there is still excitement on deadline day if Celtic bring in 3 or 4 players, and I completely agreed, because there is nothing more exciting than your club bringing in 3 or 4 players. But as the day continually went on hour by hour, midday nothing, 3 o'clock nothing, 6 o'clock nothing, then you're starting to really start to worry. The English transfer market closes, and it just felt like as the day went on, it can't possibly be as bad as it can't possibly be as bad as we think it's going to be, but it turned out it was.
Yeah, just the sort of nothingness just added to the frustration and the anger. And I think Stu's right to kind of mention the Dahlberg transfer, because when that came out and we thought, right, between 8 and 10 million, I personally thought his pedigree, I think someone likened it to when we signed Jan Vennegoor of Hesselink, someone who almost guarantees you goals because he's played at a really high level. And I thought he could save the window on his own almost, because I thought he's a proper number 9. He's played at the Euros. He's played for good clubs across Europe, and I thought he's just kind of as close to a sure thing as you were going to get. I think Will Glavin kind of made that point as well, didn't he? But it just, the longer that went on, so that kind of was on Friday morning, I think that came out, wasn't it? And then the longer that went on in the day, you were thinking, if we don't get it done today, it's unlikely that we're going to get it done on a Saturday for him to play on.
Yeah, we were talking about him playing in the derby.
Yeah, I think that was what we were all kind of hoping for. But typical Celtic, the longer it drags on, you just know that it's getting less and less likely. And then the actual day itself, given how, I know we'll come on to talk about it, but given how sort of abysmal the derby was, we thought surely now they'll realise, even as they're scrambling around, like you both said, if we get 3 or 4 players, it'll give us a shot in the arm. Go back to your old contacts. I know, like Broom hadn't moved, had he?
Yeah.
Did he move in the end?
No. And then it's just sheer frustration, and it kind of just petered out, and you think it can't get any more embarrassed than this. And then, as Stuart said, the day after the window was just, I thought, even more embarrassing than the last day of the window as well, because you're thinking, just don't sign anyone now, because what's the point?
I think that's actually quite an important point to mention, that aside from just being ill-equipped, embarrassing, the club have been embarrassed on multiple occasions over the summer, and that's just such an unpleasant position to be in as a fan when you can see how they're conducting themselves. And on top of that, and I know that we're going to dig into it a lot more, even when you look at the way that the Adam Ida transfer was handled and the situation with Yang, just extremely unprofessional. And so I think it really starts to, there've been a lot of questions over the summer about where the bottleneck was, why are we having such difficulty getting transfers done, and there's lots of theories about, is it who's playing political games here or there or whatever, and I think ultimately it is just down to sheer incompetence and not being particularly good at any level of this. And yeah, we'll dig into that a bit more in a minute, but yeah, I think embarrassment is quite a big word.
Just when kind of talking about Ida and Yang there, and almost holding players hostage, I know we did it to like Tilio a few weeks ago because we wouldn't let him go. It made me think, I know a few weeks ago Seagrass as well kind of spoke about the process of the club ignoring other clubs.
Just bizarre, just quite bizarre.
And I remember, it would have been over 10 years ago now, I remember Dirk had mentioned on, I think it was Instagram, if Instagram was still a thing then, but he said, he'd replied to someone, said, I'm stuck at Celtic. And I remember thinking, what a prick. Like, you're getting paid well, you've hardly kicked the ball, injury prone, but it makes you think, how long has this been going on? Like, how long have players been... We often say there's so much deadwood, why don't they just leave, why don't we pay them off? But maybe there has been a real breakdown in transfers out, because I'm always kind of loath to give the board credit, because a lot of people do, we're really good at getting players out for good fees, but you wonder how many have slipped through the net because they just haven't answered the phone. And yeah.
Well, even so, the outgoings has largely been one of the positives of the window from a fiscal point of view, in terms of like the money that they've recouped on players that haven't worked out. But I think naturally our focus is on players coming in and the failings there. But if you look at that Celtic squad now, there's at least 3 or 4 players whose development, whose future is completely fucked because of how badly managed this has been. You've got Inamura, Callum Osmond and Johnny Kenny jump out immediately as 3 players that should be out on loan deals if that is the plan for their development, and there's just literally been no time because they've been so disorganised and so bad with their incomings. You've got a player in Yang who doesn't want to be at the club, and the club don't really want him to be there, but he is now, and that's just the nature of it. He's in the Europa League squad. Stephen Welsh is on a pointless loan deal to Motherwell when he should have been sold, and we talked about, and it speaks to your point, Barry, about like the Udinese deal or whatever it was of many years ago, where you could have made a couple of £1 million on him.
I think it was 4. I wasn't.
You're almost going to like run down his contract, and you've got this bizarre situation with Jemai Simpson-Pusey, who it doesn't. What's the point in him being there at all? Has there been a fallout? Has he been unprofessional with regards to like not playing games in the B team? But why should he be expected to play games in the B team if he's been brought up to be a first team player? So you've got these like 6 or 7 little satellite problems on top of the obvious headline that we literally didn't sign a striker, we don't have a right winger, all these sorts of things. So It's the level of incompetency is so wide and so deep, and creates so many issues for the season coming ahead.
I just think as well, seeing in like a personal level as well, like you've got a duty of care to these young, particularly the younger players. I know Absolutely. Every player, but they've probably been sold a dream. And I was looking at something today, and when Simpson Pusey came up, both him and Rodgers mentioned Europe. And I know that it's probably AI, as you kind of noticed during the week, Gall, but these are individuals who, as you say, their development's been stunted, and it just adds to the fact that it can't be a happy camp to be around.
Well, just a comment. We're kind of going to go bounce back and forth through different. I've got a rundown, but we'll probably bounce back and forth. But here's a comment that was made when Yamada signed for Celtic. Shin Yamada. This is from Brendan Rodgers. I'm really pleased that we've brought Shin to the club. He's a strong player who can score goals and create goals for others, and I think he's someone who can definitely add an important dimension to our forward line. I know he's really keen to make his mark here in European football and deliver for Celtic, and I think he is someone who has the power, athleticism and intensity in the play to do really well for us. I look forward to working with him. Make his mark in European football. Maybe that the comment he was making is just in the European sphere, but to me, I think also Japanese media is, in terms of the football media, are really obsessed with Japanese players playing in European football, and rightly so. He's not the Europa League squad. Just quite odd that, you know, you bring a guy in who's a striker, we're desperately trying to bring 2 strikers in, and then you leave him out of the squad. He came on against Rangers at Ibrox ahead of Johnny Kenny. Maybe the idea was to put him out, Johnny Kenny out on loan. That didn't happen. There's all these moving parts that just all these wee stories that don't really add up. Yeah,
I think that's the kind of key point there, that we turned to him to try and
I thought he did all right as well.
Get us a positive result at Ibrox, and then he's just left out, and it all comes back. I hate all that sort of sending the board a message and all that, but I remember years ago being at something and it was talking about Neil Lennon, who was on Sky Sports defending the board, and someone kind of close to him had said that it got to the stage towards the end of his first tenure that the only power he had was to pick the team, because signings were being forced upon him that he didn't want, so he would just leave them out. And it kind of feels it's 11 years ago since he left the first time, that again we're still going through. People talk about he was still shopping the markets we were shopping in 25 years ago. It just seems like there is no desire to change, and everything that's been wrong with the club for so long is still at the forefront of what makes us a clusterfuck as a football club.
I think the fans have rightly got a lot of questions about. I keep seeing people talking about, like, what was the plan, or the plan was this, or the plan was that. There's so evidently no plan. But I think what is screaming out about that Yamada situation and Kenny and the game on Sunday is that Rodgers clearly expected Johnny Kenny to be going out on loan, because he clearly expected another striker of quality to be coming in. And it looks like a lot of the business prior to the last day would have been centred around Daizen Maeda playing on the left, so that you have options on the wings, and you would have 2 strikers through the middle with presumably Shin Yamada as the third sort of young development player. Now that that's not come to fruition, I think he's had to look at the crop of players he has and said, right, we literally cannot get Johnny Kenny out the door because we might need him because we haven't signed anyone. And between Johnny Kenny and Shin Yamada, you're talking about 2 options that ultimately aren't good enough to play for Celtic at the moment. So who's the lesser of the 2 evils? I think Johnny Kenny offers you a lot of work rate. His pressing's really good. His finishing's not very good, but he has scored a goal or 2, whereas Yamada hasn't really yet.
Would you not say that in 3 years, someone like Johnny Kenny, who I can see a lot of, I don't think he's good enough to play for Celtic. I don't think he's good enough to play for Celtic long term, but I can see the attributes that he brings, right?
Yeah.
But Shin Yamada's just in the door. He's not been. Johnny Kenny's been at Celtic for 3 years and he's made 1 start. Now that tells me that Brendan Rodgers doesn't see, at this point, maybe never, he's the guy to be able to lead the line for Celtic. Shin Yamada's had more starts in his 2 months here than Johnny Kenny has.
Do you think then it's political?
I think it's political. Just on that, so I think there's a
just one other small factor. He might look at the fact that at least Johnny Kenny has experience at European level.
Look what we're talking about.
I know, but that is the problem, that these are 2 players that shouldn't even be on the radar, and we're discussing them as if that. Who's going to start? Is it going to be Johnny?
Here's just in terms of like people talking about Shin Yamada and Inamura and Osman being left out of the Europa League squad, and GSP as well, and Rogers signings and the board signings. Here's a comment from Dermot Desmond from 2 years ago. Just to clarify the position, it came up a number of times in misinformed press reports and other commentaries about recruiting players. In the last 20 odd years, the manager of the club decides what players to take in, not the board, not anyone else. Searches provide information to the manager then makes a decision, maybe in conjunction with his coaching staff. He makes the ultimate decision. He's chairman of the board. That's not true.
Yeah,
that's just a lie. That was
literally not true.
Yeah, I mean, he's literally not the chairman of the board.
For one, yeah.
Yeah, there's plenty of mistakes in that comment, to be fair. Can I make one comment just in terms of, I know we're talking about non-football things, but here's my concern with Celtic this season. Celtic, I think, performs best when they've got a talisman.
Yeah.
And it doesn't necessarily always have to be a striker. Right, I don't want to go all the way back, but Henrik Larsson, you look at even more recently Kyogo, you look at Kuhn, what he did when Kyogo left. Someone who just takes the team by the scruff of the neck, someone that the entire team can look at and say, if we're in a bind, you've got the quality to pull us out. Edward, Dembele.
Even like Van Dijk as a centre-half.
Absolutely. There are so many examples of it. I just don't feel we've got that in this team at the moment, and that's a real fear.
Well, I think that realistically, on paper now, it probably is Dyson Maeda, but Dyson Maeda has started the season so poorly and has been linked away all summer. Maybe he was unsettled, maybe he's going to settle down. It depends how. It'll be interesting to know how comfortable he is playing as a striker, but I think that for all this clusterfuck of the last 48 hours, 72 hours of the window, even all the noise around Kelechi Iheanacho, who we haven't even really discussed yet, I think Dyson Maeda will essentially be your starting number 9. And I think that if Dyson Maeda can get back into close to the form that he was in last season, largely that can be enough to carry Celtic through the season, because it was last year. But not
on the evidence
that we've seen so far. And also, you can't just keep going to the well with that.
No. I think the only sort of kind of crumb of comfort I'm taking is the fact that we do now have two wingers who you'd imagine are going to start. I know they're both left-sided, but one will get shunted to the right. And see if Dyson knows that he is the number one striker, because I think Iheanacho will probably be a backup until he gets himself fit. But see if Dyson knows he's not going to get shunted at 60 minutes to left wing, then they'll bring on a winger so he'll go back into the centre and stuff. See if he knows, like, I'm going to be the striker for the next 8 to 10 games. That's all I need to focus on.
Yep.
That might bring some stability itself. But yeah, he's kind of gone back to the Dyson before, who's kind of shanking things out of the pitch and snatching at things, and it's not ideal.
Yeah, and I think that's the kind of a fear that last season was just not an anomaly, because he's a very good player. We're not questioning the fact he's a good player, but as a striker, maybe last season was just such a purple patch of form that it can't be replicated, and he's just kind of reverting to type. Now, type is still good. I'm not criticising Dyson Maeda, but he needs help. I just want to run through the players, right? We brought in this summer. Kieran Tierney, Ross Doohan, Benjamin Negrin, Callum Osmond, Hayato Inamura, Shin Yamada, GSP, Balakisha, Sarachi, Tunekke, and Iheanacho. Celtic spent around 13.5 million quid on those players. The players that went out: Greg Taylor, Nawrocki's gone on loan, Lagerbielka, Kuhn, Palmer, Kwon, Tillio, Ida, Frame, Welsh, and then we got 5 million for the Frimpong money. That works out at about 32 million. So there's like a, in-prof of about 18 million quid. Question: is the squad weaker or as strong or stronger than it was before the window opened/closed? Stuart Duggan.
On paper, definitely weaker. I think that what you have just now in some of those late acquisitions, I'll lump Iheanacho in with him, although I think he comes with his own set of baggage for a number of reasons. But if you just take those three players with Balakisha, Tunekke and Iheanacho, as it stands, no one knows what kind of impact they're going to have on the team, in the same way that we didn't know what impact Jota would have had, what impact
Kuhn would have had.
Yeah. So I think it is important that people just hold their judgment,
park it a bit,
park it a wee bit, and don't just project their frustrations with how the business has been done onto those players, because it's not going to help anyone. And we were talking, it must have been before the Rangers game, and I was asking if anyone could think of examples of players that had amazing debuts for Celtic, as in, would it be a crumb of comfort for me right now if someone goes, I remember these 3 or 4 players that came in and scored on their debut, and Balakisha is going to do that today. So obviously that didn't happen, and as we talked about it, there weren't a huge amount of players that we could think of. Scott Sinclair came off the bench against Hearts, and that was kind of like as good as we could come up with. There are plenty of examples of players that have come in and seemed like underwhelming business that have done really, really well for Celtic, and so can only hope that that's going to be the case with some of these players, even if you land 2 out of 3 or 1 out of 3, someone that, as you say, you can hang your hat on, or like looks like a match winner, and can hopefully with that just free up the team a little bit, because there are still really good players at Celtic. Reo Hatate, the big narrative going into the summer was how we couldn't afford to lose a player of his quality. He hasn't shown any of that this year. Callum McGregor has been one of the best players, most consistent players in the league for the last 5 to 10 years. Haven't seen that either. Something has to happen where someone can come in and just free up the team a little bit, and then maybe in the aggregate, it's not been good. It's definitely not how you should conduct yourself, but maybe it's enough to get through the season.
What I would say is, just on Tunetke and Balakisha, Celtic and Brendan Rodgers' sides are so reliant on wingers, and that's positive and negative. Positive because if everything's working, the wingers are your stars. Negative because if things aren't working, all of the kind of pressure falls on them, and we've brought in 2 wingers. We brought in 2 guys who Balakisha less so, but Tunetke, when he was in Norway last year, performed really well. Since he's went to Hammarby, he has struggled a little bit. He's someone that reminds me, and I'm not saying they're the same player by any stretch of imagination, I'm just saying in terms of it crushing expectations. The fear with Tunetke for me is that it's a Yang situation, where Yang was put in a position where he was Celtic's starting winger, and he couldn't deal with the pressure. Now, am I saying that Tunetke can't deal with the pressure? No, because I don't know yet. But I would have preferred that if we had 2 wingers, and maybe Tunetke was a guy that you would bring on 60 minutes. Even the same with Balakisha. You know, if we'd done our business right, if we'd brought in Broom to be your starting guy, and then we could just, Barry, there's no ability to allow someone to develop kind of like what happened with Kuhn, where he had 6 months where he wasn't at his best, and then all of a sudden, boom, shooting out the...
Yeah, and I think it's even magnified even further than it was for Yang, because the bad feeling, as you said, Stuart, we don't want it to kind of spill into the new players, but there is huge pressure on these 2 guys before they've even kicked a ball properly, because they are the ones that have brought up more than 75% of the spending between them for the window, and as you say, like, there's so much emphasis on them to create and score goals, so it just adds pressure that we didn't need as well. And I think that one thing that really frustrates me, and you would think if Celtic had any sort of sense, is see when they do the interviews, and that question, how long have you known about the interest? Oh, a very long time. Yeah. You would think, see, for the last couple of days of the window, cut that question.
Yeah.
I've known about Celtic's interest since March or something. Well, why didn't you come in?
Especially when one of the players knocked you back in January.
Yeah, true.
Stu, you're an EPL head. A little bit. You probably know more about Ian Atchell than myself and Barry do, in terms of, you know, obviously he's not played in the EPL for a while, but what's your thoughts on him? Is there anything that you look at there and you think, well, actually, there is positives?
I think it genuinely has been a long time since Ian Atchell was considered a sort of hot property, and you are going back to City, which was, I think it was...
He scored against us
about 10 years ago that he scored against us, so that's how long you're talking about. And he, at the time, it would have been Aguero, wouldn't it? He was
deputy.
You know, in the sort of debate of should he be playing or whatever. The move to Leicester was not a successful one. I kind of feel like it's a little bit like an Odsonne Edouard trajectory as well, where you sort of saw this player that once he goes to a lower team and becomes the main man, then suddenly he'll sort of do it, and he just never really did. I haven't at all followed him at all with the Sevilla move or the Middlesbrough stuff or anything like that. I can only hope that there is a little bit of something with his relationship with Rodgers that maybe he's going to be able to get a little bit more out of him than those last two moves would have suggested. I mean, there's been question marks about his professionalism, his work ethic. There was tweets saying that he looked like he's essentially just given up and just chucked it. That's obviously not going to be acceptable at a club like Celtic. I think that
very quick. I'm
talking about the captain next week.
Yeah. Well, I think that ultimately Celtic creates a massive opportunity for Kelechi Iheanacho, and it's whether or not he wants to make anything of that. I think he will be given probably quite a bit of breathing room because there is such a low bar of expectation for him. I think that some of it reminds me a little bit of the Ida loan deal, where you were like, who the fuck is this guy? Why is he coming in? And then did actually have quite an impactful 6 months. Obviously, we don't need to worry about the nature of the deal where he's on. I think that's worked out quite favourably, where it's sort of a similar deal to Schmeichel, where you've got a year.
And that worries me, he's 28.
Yeah, but I think
should be in his prime.
I think that is like it's almost like getting an injury-prone player on a pay-to-play. It's a smart business that you can do when you're scraping the barrel, to the extent that Celtic are, because
I was expecting a 4-year deal, which would have been fucking brutal.
We've talked about a few players that essentially, Celtic have cleared all the deadwood. Celtic have signed evidently 3 or 4 players that are not going to make it at all at the club, and that we're just going to have to move on next summer or the summer after. Obviously, the move with Adam Ida has been really good business, because it looked like that was a real albatross signing that you wouldn't be able to recoup money on, and he's just going to sit and fester away. And in some regards, I do think having him out of the equation helps, because there's no like, well, we've spent 9 million, we need to play him. You've now got 2 development players in Kenny and Shin Yamada that nobody really rates that highly and could only really impress, you would hope, from the low level, and a player in Iheanacho who I think people actively think could drag down the quality of the club. So hopefully it's such a low bar that they do clear that and you're pleasantly surprised. But that you almost have to split it into 2 camps of like, this is where we are now, and these are the players that we have, and how are we going to make that workable? And then don't marry the fact that it's an absolute disaster the way that you've come to find yourself in
back
this
the team, sack the board.
Well, yeah.
Basically.
Very much so.
Barry, your kind of thoughts on Iheanacho? You are like me, you are bitter, you're a small man who, when someone rejects Celtic, they should be shot out of a cannon. And this guy rejected Celtic 6 months ago. So he's starting off on a bad foot for me.
Yeah. Trying to think positively that the fact that he is only 28, you could say like it's ridiculous giving a 28-year-old a 1-year deal, but that kind of shows where he is. But you would just hope that I can't really think of an example off the top of my head where a sort of player who has gone off the rails and we've kind of polished him up. They used to say Martin O'Neill did it with players. Maybe I know he didn't sign Bobby Pettit, but he got a tune out of him for six months, and then he ended up getting in the Holland squad. And probably an example I can think of actually is Martin O'Neill just before he came in, he signed Stan Collymore for
Leicester. Yeah.
And he did a ton for him as well. But it's just kind of bleak. I kind of got to the stage on it was a Tuesday, wasn't it? Because the window closed on the Monday. And I thought, just don't sign anyone now.
That's kind of how I felt. Like, obviously there was links to like Patrick Bamford, who's 32 tomorrow. Happy birthday, Patrick! I did check his date of birth and all that.
But see, just to jump in there, do you think that we'll sign any more of the players on the?
I think they'd be mental too. I think that would be desperate.
Yeah.
I think it's already a really bad look to be shopping in that market at all, because it's very much an admission of failure. You're not. See, if you are doing like a full squad rebuild like Rangers have, for example, and if there's something missing, like I think Rangers have done some good business with a deeply flawed manager that I think that we can talk about the impact on the season, but I think they've still not got their problems to seek. They have a big leadership vacuum in that team, so maybe they look at an old head like a Christian Eriksen or someone like that they could add. I could understand the merit in doing that. For a team like Celtic, we shouldn't be doing that. That is kind of beneath you, and you are possibly just ending up on Ziyech was a good example. He's, I believe, still on the free transfers list. Really good player on his day, but would probably want big wages and probably come with a bit of a chip on his shoulder, and it's not really helpful when we talked about it a little bit the other day, that maybe you're going to get a little bit of a siege mentality now, and you can't really have someone that's got that kind of attitude coming into the mix. So you would hope that's it done.
Yeah, just the kind of late kind of signing it after the window closed. But remember under Ronnie when we brought in John Guidetti and he wasn't able to register in time for the Europa League, so we had to play Skepovic, remember that?
That's right.
Guidetti was tearing it up in the league, but then we weren't able to play him until...
That's right, until the Inter Milan game.
Yeah.
And he scored when he came off the bench.
Again, another administration nightmare from Celtic.
Yeah, Ewan Henderson. Was it Ewan or Liam? That was Liam. That was Liam's assist for him when he volleys in at the end. Yeah. I mean, in regards to the squad and, you know, the weakness of it, before we get to the board stuff, how confident are you that we'll have enough domestically to comfortably win the league? So I just want to make a comment that I keep hearing people say stuff like, we'll win the league, that's fine. The issue I have is, and I'm not saying I don't necessarily disagree with that, but there's a part of me that expects Celtic to turn up against Kilmarnock with their next league game and to perform the way we did against Kierat and Ibrox. Now, we could still perform like that and still win, but if we perform with that sort of element of pedestrian sort of plodding along, slow paced, not aggressive, not coming out, we might get picked off more than people are expecting. And that's not to say we won't win the league, but Stuart.
Yeah, I don't think you can be confident of that. And I think that the business that we've done is genuinely a leveller. I think that some teams have recruited really well and appear to be playing slightly more exciting, slightly more expansive, slightly more competitive football. If you look at Hearts, if you look at Hibs, Aberdeen have done some good business. They still look a bit of a bin fire, but they've done good business at the end of the window there. Even teams like Motherwell are playing like quite progressive football that can catch Celtic out. If you look at the performances and results that we've had, even the good results, the St Mirren performance was dreadful, you know, and these are home games. And now, if you look at that's probably like the mean level of performance that we're seeing. I do think that Celtic can absolutely turn a corner, and they are clearly playing with a very, very low confidence at the moment. I was listening to the pod with Will yesterday, just talking about the volume of players that just want to pass the ball backwards. No one wants to kind of take ownership of anything. I can see us shaking that loose, but I can also see things getting worse. And
fuck.
No,
you're right.
It can stagnate. It absolutely can stagnate unless, you know, they can kind of get playing. And if that's the case, Celtic could drop points anywhere, you know. And I think that the natural question would be, well, who's going to compete with them? And I think you saw it last year with Aberdeen. Hearts are kind of having a little bit of a moment just now, but they've kind of got their points sometimes coming from 2 and 3 goals behind. I don't think that they would have the consistency over the course of a season to put in a real title challenge. And obviously Rangers, they've yet to win a game, and for as poor as Sunday was, they still didn't look like winning that game, and could absolutely see a world where they drop points to Hearts. And
he's gone.
If they move Russell Martin on
quickly,
and if it's only like 9 or even 10 points, if you bring in a manager with even an ounce of backbone, I think you could really get that squad playing. And I'm probably put that down to even like a Steven Gerrard or someone like that, not someone that's like renowned for their tactical nous, just literally someone that can play some pretty basic practical football. I think they probably do have enough quality to go and win games and beat the rest of the teams. And if Celtic are just floundering around, realistically, we're not going to change the manager. Realistically, we're not going to go and spend £30 million in January. This is kind of it. There's people that are already kind of pinning hopes on Jota coming back in January and carrying the team. And it could just be tough. It could be better. These new signings could hit the ground and suddenly you're like, what were we worried about? Obviously, this isn't the way we want to conduct our business, but we're okay. It's just a bit of an unknown just now, but something needs to change.
I just have the fear, just as you were talking about the game at Rugby Park, like traditionally going back 30 odd years ago, it's a ground that's never been particularly kind to us at times. But how often have we said, and even about the derby on Sunday, that 5-10 minutes into it, you think, I can kind of see how this is going. And I think Rugby Park on that pitch, we'll know very, very quickly how it's going to go. and the longer it goes without scoring, just that dread will start to come in as well. So I agree with Stu. I think it could get worse. I think the bad feeling, you tend not to see when there's bad feeling off the park. It's really rare that it doesn't spill into what's happening on the pitch as well. The players aren't daft. They'll know the discontent. They'll have seen, as we'll come on to, the sort of fan, the temperature of the feeling of the fans. But again, being sort of negative and reactionary, but I just can't see much light at the end of the tunnel. And Stu's right, we do have good players if they can sort of galvanise, but I just have no confidence that this is going to be a successful season. In regard to the issue I have, so if you want more kind of analysis and a look back at stuff, the Cynic.co, if you sign up to the Cynic.co, you get over 32 podcasts a month, some tactical analysis, lots of feature podcasts, news podcasts. You can also check us out on Patreon if you search for the Cynic on Patreon. Lots of stuff. Join us. There's lots of people who are signing up, and we really appreciate everyone who takes the time. My issue, Stu, is it feels less like a personnel problem and more like a systemic problem within how we're playing. And it doesn't feel like, as we sit here now, things might change. And let's try and be positive, but also let's try and be realistic. It doesn't feel like we're going to get to Rugby Park and all of a sudden there's either going to be like, oh, someone's sitting in beside McGregor to, change how we play out. Someone's, we're playing now 3-5-2 or whatever. It just feels like, as Barry says, systemically, that might be the issue.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I don't think it's strictly a personnel thing. I think that you have to go on the performances that you're seeing. If you look at the two Kairat games and the Ibrox derby, it's three of the worst games of football I've ever seen. And we've gone, there's so many big kind of facets of our play that are missing. Obviously, a lot of folk are now talking about Greg Taylor and the role that he had, kind of inverting in the midfield. It doesn't look like there's a desire to maybe return to that, but also we're not really seeing the same overlapping or interplay between the fullbacks and the wingers in the way that Johnson and Kuhn had that excellent relationship. How many goals did we have where we're scoring from one overlapping the other? And these sorts of patterns of play are not really there at the moment, so we need to try and find that. But even within themselves just now, it's unnatural for Celtic teams, and I know that Roger said this, and you've got to wonder where is it happening, because he was like, a Celtic team doesn't go out. I've never asked a team to go and play backwards and play sideways and all that sort of stuff. But
I think that's self-preservation on his part. Like, he does have previous of kind of blaming everyone but himself.
He absolutely does have that, yeah, and I think he is a big part of the problem. I think he's been a big part of the problem with some of the transfer stuff, because there's obviously political struggle going on behind the scenes, and I think that what the team would really benefit from is probably a fresh perspective and fresh impetus of a new manager to reignite your Hatates, McGregors, etc. But one of the biggest problems is that we are just sort of stuck with this for just now, and so he has to try and figure it out. But yeah, I could absolutely see that Kilmarnock game being exactly the same as we've had before.
See, the thing that kind of makes me wary is that Rangers defence, you saw how awful they were away in Bruges, and with the pace of Daizen Maeda, you would thought just constantly
in behind. They were so high.
Because we kind of started the game and I noticed Schmeichel was kicking it long, which he never really does, and I thought maybe we are going to go for it, but we didn't. And I think it's more Rodgers saying that. I think it is by instruction that he's telling him to do that, and if you're a player who's probably not feeling great about themselves anyway, kind of hearing that, it just adds to the bad feeling. Like, he's going out blaming us for taking safe passes when that's what we work on all week.
I mean, not Daizen Maeda, Rio Hatate looked like a neutered dog. Like, he's someone who it feels like had his wings clipped. He had his back to goal for most of that game, which is not his game. No. Here's just some comments from Rodgers. Didn't think it was a good game at all. Positive for us. We've defended well in the main and the start of the season, being very resolute. We didn't have any shots on goal against us, but our offensive game is nowhere near the level I'd like it to be at. We've lost players that connect the game for us. When you go through a spell of games you're not scoring, it can affect the other guys and they don't quite make the forward pass and they make the safe pass. See that? bit of a dig at the players.
Yeah.
That creativity has come out of the team, and we need to find those connections again. I'm very confident we'll improve. We have to. That's not the Celtic way of playing. And then he was asked about dips of form with Rio Hatate and Daizen Maeda, and this is kind of the line that's kind of going to, you'll never die by this season. Competition is your best coach. We need to find that. Sometimes you need that stimulus of competition. That's clearly what we need. And obviously the window closed, and we brought in 2 players, and the 2 players with Tonetke maybe get less experience, and Iheanacho a free transfer. We'll just kind of finish up talking about the Rangers game because we want to kind of get to the board and what the support can do and stuff. But Stu, it was just a dreadful game of fucking football, man.
Yeah, it was really, really bad. I think that there's, on top of what he's saying there's just weird stuff. The one that really sticks out to me, there was a moment in the game where, must have been early in the first half, McGregor has the ball, has so much time and space, and he goes to pass it out to Ralston, just passes it into no man's land straight out of the park. Yeah. And we used to play so quick and so fluid, and it was all two touch, and it now just seems like there's this indecision. And he copped a lot of flack for his comments about like the connections. We need to find those connections, and I do actually think there's something in that it's not necessarily when you say connections, maybe you look at like a Rio Hatate or whoever it is that's supposed to link up, but I think it's who they're linking up to. It's like the other side of that they need to know who it is, how they play.
It's not the connector, it's the connectees.
Yeah, sort of, yeah. Like, so you've got Benjamin Nygren that's playing wildly out of position. He's never a right winger, dreadful. Can't go by a man, not fast enough, just looks a bit lost as well in the system. I thought that Balakisha took the ball in well, looked comfortable on the ball, obviously wasn't taking on his man or going by his man, which was really frustrating, but that almost looked coached to me, because you would have thought that your first big debut in a big game, you would want to be the guy that breaks ranks and goes and makes a mark, and he just looked a bit unsure of himself. But I think he kind of gets a pass just because of the turmoil with which he's kind of come into the club. But I think that once you can just get a set way of playing, it's the set players. If it's Balakrisha on the left, if it's Tonetke on the right, and Maeda through the middle, Hatate, McGregor, you can start to build those relationships. The right wingers, the left winger, fullbacks can start making connections, and then hopefully you get a bit of fluency in the play. At the moment, we've had a lot of square pegs and round holes for the majority of the games that we've played this season, whether it's shuffling scales out to the left, whether it's Maeda playing in the left wing then playing in the middle, whether it's rotating cast of like underwhelming strikers. The team needs some stability, and it needs a bit of energy, and hopefully those 2 or 3 additions can offer that. I don't feel enormously confident about that, but it's about as good as you can hope for at this time. Yeah.
Barry, how would you sum up the derby on Sunday?
I just think we played it too safe. I don't think we were ever really in any danger, as Stuart says as well. And I think it just kind of, the on-field performance reflected the off-field performance, and it's probably the poorest I've seen Cal McGregor. And I know he's had some pretty poor games recently. As you both mentioned, Hatate was so far in our half, he couldn't be dangerous at all. And I think it's an important point that Stuart made, that it can't be great for the midfield 3 to look up, and they used to see the runs of Kyogo, could give it to Jota, could give it to Kuhn, a fit and fire and Daizen. And I do have sympathy for Rodgers, because I know his style of play hasn't been great lately, but when you've got so many players have been taken out of that team who are match winners. Adam Idah has had a terrible start to the season and didn't have a particularly good season last year, but he still scored 20 odd goals. And
does it feel like anyone's going to go double figures? Just does it feel like it?
Nygren maybe, but I don't know.
To me, again, that comes back to the talisman thing, where you have like a totem of the team who's going to take everyone's going to be impressed by and everyone's going to look to, and I just don't think we have that. Everyone's looking all around.
I think at the moment there is a little bit of a benefit that there's a lot of on paper winnable games coming up, that even like that Thistle game, if you can go and put in a good performance and just like build a bit of confidence. The best performance that we've seen this season so far was probably the Falkirk game, where they did genuinely look pretty good. Obviously that's because you're playing against a lower level of opposition, but it's something like that, and then try and get some players motoring, try and get them into a more kind of creative mindset, and then I think you do need to question their mentality, because I talk about it a lot, but I think there's a big mentality problem there. players that were once absolutely bulletproof, like McGregor, now just looks really scared, and that's not really helpful when you're going to places like Ibrox. I think that Rangers offered nothing, and I know that Russell Martin sort of received some plaudits for being slightly more pragmatic, but I think he got it badly wrong as well, where
we should have taken advantage of them.
Oh, absolutely. Like their best player this season has been that Gassama, and they obviously
put him on the wrong side.
They put him on the wrong side. That's the first time he's played on the right, where you're playing into, on paper, our best defender. And I think that he really thought that Mikey Moore was just going to make a fool of Ralston, and just didn't really have that good a game. And I think that it's the approach to the game that just felt pretty gutless, and they kind of huffed and puffed a bit towards the end. And they actually they looked a bit more dangerous and a bit more lively when you had
McCowan and Yang. Shin.
Yeah, players kind of in their positions. Forrest, and you had Maeda out on the left, and hopefully that's the sort of thing that you can see when you try and put players in their positions and a bit of stability.
See, just kind of, as you mentioned, in our fixtures, I think one thing that would help us hugely would be see if either Balikwisha or Tenetke can get off the mark straight away, and then you'll see the buzz around the team because the new guy is kind of taking the bull by the horns. We need that probably more now than we ever have, because I know that wingers are traditionally inconsistent, but if one of them can do that, I think you'll see the kind of reverberations around the rest of the team and the support. Because like at Olympics, Stu says, the window is closed now. These are the players we have for the next 4 months. And we need something to galvanise like that. And I think something as simple, even if it hits off the backside and goes in, we need an early goal from one of the new wingers.
Sorry, Hugh.
But I think what will be difficult in this run of fixtures is what we're going to kind of come and talk about just now, which is how can you continue to apply pressure to the board, which will generate ill feeling, undeniably. It's going to be toxic, whilst also trying to produce positivity around the team. And I think that's something we just have to get the hard hats on with and get on with.
Yeah, just quickly before we move on, just Kieran Tierney and Anthony Ralston. Anthony Ralston didn't actually travel to the Scotland squad. He stayed at Celtic Park. But Tierney and Ralston are injured. They thought Tierney was going to be available because they thought he would overcome his injury, whatever injury he's got, whether it's a knock or something, but he hasn't, so he's pulled out. I mean, there's real concern about Tierney that we're not going to have the time to go. We'll maybe touch on that next week when we look towards the actual game itself. But two fullbacks, two experienced players. You can say anything you really want about Tony Ralston, but he knows how to play that position and he knows what's required of him. You'd now be looking at. My concern would be that you would look at that and you go, okay, Sarachi and Donovan will play. Is there any chance he plays Scales at left back and plays Sarachi at right back because he's played there before? That comes back to consistency. I'd rather consistently have Sarachi's your backup and Donovan's your backup until and Alistair Johnson comes back. But if he starts messing about in that department, that's where I'll get the fear.
Yeah, and I can't remember what pod it was on, but again, if you were a proper fully functioning football club, Kobe Donovan would have been out last season. Probably played 35-40 games for a team maybe in the league below or even in the top division in Scotland, and you would think he's reliable now. And for the small sample size that we have seen of him, particularly in Kairat away, I thought he looked really good, really positive.
I agree.
I think in the friendlies he looked really solid defensively, but in Kairat he looked really good defensively. That one where he kind of got to the cutback for Negrin. But if he is to do that with putting Scales out to the left, I think again that adds to the bad feeling, because sometimes when you're in the depths of despair, a phoenix can rise, and Donovan could be that. But if you just shunt players about again, it goes back to what Stuart was saying about the inconsistency and that sort of players not playing in the right position and then they don't trust themselves like they should. So I think you're right. I think it has to be Donovan comes in and Sarachi on the left-hand side.
I also think that with the left-back situation, again, because we've functioned so poorly, I think he would be more inclined to use Inamura domestically against the right opposition than putting Scales out there, just because you're cutting about, you might as well get boots on. And he did look like he could function domestically in the Livingston game. That should be a better offer than putting Liam Scales out to the left.
I think the fact he's left him out of the Europa League squad, I think that's the death knell. I think
there was no way he was ever making that. I honestly, I think that I understand why people are up in arms, because on paper you've left 4 signings out of the European squad, but none of them are a surprise with the exception of Shin. The Tierney stuff is, do we know that he's actually injured? Because I thought that it was just one of these like, I'm out, wink nudge, because he needs to manage his fitness.
Steve Clark said he had a knock and they thought he would have been able to run it off. Not run it off. It would be able to have it fixed essentially by the time the game came on Friday, but no.
He needs to wrap that shit.
Yeah, 100%.
Retire from Scotland. I know you're a big Scotland fan, Gall, but
I'd love him to retire. I agree. Yeah. If he can't finish 90 minutes for Celtic, but then is it he can't finish 90 minutes for Celtic because, you know, there is a style of thought that says maybe if he had been finishing 90 minutes for Celtic, he'd be up to speed, because you either play him or you don't. Like, pulling him off 60 minutes of every game. There's managing, you know. I don't buy it.
To be fair, for what was that, the seventh or eighth game of the season, and only on the 7th do you have a literal left back that you could play instead. And I know that Inamura's been about, but he's also not a left back. That's something that we're trying to mould into happening. Yeah. So I think it's mostly been an abundance of caution, although Rodgers did have those comments where he was almost like, we're
building him up.
That's a bit of hopefully we'll get him up to 90.
as if he hadn't realised.
You're right.
Here's Steve Clark's comments on Kieran Tierney. Everybody was agreed that Tierney's injury would settle down in a few days. It didn't settle down, so obviously the most sensible thing is for Kieran to go back to his club. Obviously disappointed that Kieran's not with us. Fair enough. So we'll see. Let's talk about the anger from the support towards the Celtic board. The Cynic, as a collective, as a media fan media outlet, took part in the open letter to the club. I'll read the open letter out, not the whole thing, but the main points. After a disastrous transfer window and failure to qualify for the Champions League, Celtic supporters are once again calling for urgent action to address the clear structural problems within the club. We demand full transparency from the board regarding its repeated failure to back the manager and reinvest our money into the playing squad. We also demand accountability. What course of action will be taken to ensure that a collective failure does not happen again? In addition, we highlight once more the club's lack of a coherent fan engagement strategy and call for a progressive, innovative approach to working with supporters. Then we obviously have some questions to Michael Nicholson, Chris Mackay and Peter Lawwell and Dermot Desmond. What is the club's long-term footballing strategy? Why has there been no investment in critical positions despite repeated pleas from the manager? Obvious weaknesses in the squad and calls from supporters. There's lots of really interesting questions. You can find it on Twitter at 90 Minute Cynic on Twitter. The whole thing's there. You can find it on Instagram at 90 Minute Cynic if you search on Instagram, and we're also on BlueSky. You're not going to believe this, at 90 Minute Cynic on BlueSky. But we took part in it. Lots of other fan organisations took part of it. A hell of a lot of CSCs took part of it. That was yesterday, and since then, delighted to say that 160 CSCs and 29 extra fan media and online platforms have signed on top of that. The anger's palpable, Barry. How are you feeling about it?
Yeah, it's just I know that you kind of speak about like the stages of grief or whatever, but I think initially I was kind of almost wounded, but it was just kind of felt really kind of low, but the anger has sort of ramped up, and I think Stu mentioned earlier it's maybe one positive to come out of that. Like, we do seem like we're getting organised as a support. The happy clappers are becoming fewer and fewer, which is good, but I think what's clear is there's a real disdain and real hatred, I think, of the support from the board. You can tell that they don't give a fuck. They think we should just pay our money and turn up. And I'm encouraged because how often have we, I remember talking during the season that shall not be named, that we feel a bit powerless, but I think the fact that we are getting organised, the fact that there's so many, 160 more CSCs in one day is incredible. If you think how many people, I know some CSCs will be kind of small, the ones that are abroad or whatever, smaller, but that is a hell of a lot. That's thousands and thousands of people, and part of me, I'm kind of in two minds, because part of me thinks they surely can't ignore that, but going back to that point where I think they fucking detest the support, and something has to change. I don't know what it will, and I think there has to be things happening at games, and it has to ramp up game after game until something changes. The most obvious example recently was the Bernard Higgins. Yep, Bernard Higgins, and that was kind of thwarted. But yeah, I'm encouraged, and it's the only thing that's sort of bringing a crumb of comfort to me that so many people are like-minded now, because when the Celtic support is unified, it can be a really powerful animal.
Stuart, I think one of the big issues, people always talk about, Sales for Change and that unbelievable movement that happened in, 94 and how that really brought our club back to life. But that was a time when Celtic were in the doldrums. There's a lot of people who turn around. It's harder to unite people against a board that have delivered lots of trophies. Celtic, in my opinion, and I think a lot of people's, Celtic have won trophies in spite of the board, not because of the board. But trying to it does feel like there's a change. There's a bit of a sea change.
Yeah, I think
Great Beck album as well.
Yeah, of course. That's what I was thinking. Yeah, I think that a lot of people, I think, would look at that post and say, "Well, what's that going to do?" Well, I think that objectively, I don't expect the board to look at that and go, "Fuck, everyone signed that tweet. Well, we'd better suddenly, Michael, you've gone, Peter, you're gone, sorry, and I'm going to sell the club." That's not how it works. But I do think what you're seeing is that everyone that's represented by those views and the volume of people there is really encouraging if you hold those views, and it shows that you're not in the minority. And it also, I think, should come as just a first sort of warning shot to the powers that be, that this is not like the Green Brigade that they're sort of tangling with, and it's not the sort of thing where there's clearly a division in the support. It's becoming increasingly unified, and that if this is how motivated they are initially, and these are the volume of people that feel this way, that is only going to escalate, and they're not really going to tolerate just head in the sand sort of stuff. I don't think Celtic will handle it well. I don't think that it'll come out and say, "Listen, hands up, we fucked that. We won't do it again. We're really sorry." I think that the only acceptable outcome for this is change, and that would be people losing their jobs. Yep. And I think that you're unlikely to unseat Dermot Desmond. I don't think this movement has the same scope for, well, let's try and become fan-owned by whatever which way buyout is 34% or whatever it is that you would have to do that. But I do think that there's a real possibility that someone will have to carry the can for this. I think Tisdale should go, absolutely. I think he would have been the board's patsy. So
absolute
that's
patsy.
An easy one.
Yeah.
I think that Michael Nicholson needs to go, because he seems to be so intrinsically involved in the way that we're doing our transfer business, and seems to be fucking dreadful at it.
Out of his depth.
And I think that whatever his level of influence is, Peter Lawwell has to go as well, because that ultimately that's kind of how the can got carried for the 10 season, where he stepped away, hopefully never to be seen again. Yeah, then he is fucking weaseling back in. But I think the sooner that you can remove those sort of
toxic, they're toxic individuals.
They're toxic individuals, but that's one way to look at it. But just the status quo of like, sorry, this is how we do things here. I think that's Desmond's problem. That's Desmond's problem, that these are the people that keep the status quo, and that this is how we've always done things, and this is how we will always do things. And so until you remove those, I mean, I know it was short-lived, but bringing in someone like Don Mackay, you saw the club start to function differently in that short period of time. I know that's a combination of maybe Don Mackay being a bit out of his depth and not knowing what he was doing, and a manager like Ange Postecoglou coming in, but the open and honest communication, like that press conference that they had at the very start of that regime, people were sharing videos from it the other day, and you're like, that is kind of all you want. And I know that quite a few platforms have talked about it. The thing that the Thelwell, the Rangers guy, who's not a popular figure at Rangers, but coming out and just being quite frank and open and honest, that's all you want ultimately. And we don't have people at the club that are going to do that, and so you need to remove them. And the more that you can ramp up pressure, whether it's like the Bernard Higgins thing, the only acceptable outcome for that is that they released a statement saying it's not going to happen, it goes away. And so I think that this is the start of something. This isn't, well, that's it, we've done a tweet, so hopefully that resolves it. I think it's a sign of things to come.
Barry, like if you look at the club and you look how it's run, you know, you've got the Old Boys Network, The guys who work at Celtic have worked there for a long time.
Yeah.
That's why someone like Don Mackay, whether he was good, whether he wasn't, we'll never know at this point. But he came in and maybe he was an outsider and they didn't like that. Everyone that's there has been promoted, or everyone there has been basically brought in to do the job that they want to be done, and they've known them, right? Same goes with the manager. I'm sorry for me, but if you've got a manager who's like, Dermot's my best mate, that there needs to be a complete distinct difference between personal and private relationships. Professional and private relationships. And the fact that he's sitting at press conference going, "Oh, Dermot's my best pal," and everyone bleeds green and white. It's so unprofessional, and it's so old boys act, and it's so we own this and you don't, and fuck you, and we bleed green and white and you don't understand what that is. I was so this is going to sound really lame, but I was so affronted by the idea they bleed green and white. They're doing it. It's like, well, I'm paying £800.
Yeah, they're not putting in a game in their life. Yeah, and then I'd go one step further as well. Well, we need to stop bringing. I know the last couple have been really good because it's KT and Jota, but we need to stop this. Only bringing back players that have played for us before. It's just they're so stuck in their ways that it is this closed shop, and yeah, that infuriated me. Like Rodgers, I think what was clear to me before last Friday's press conference that he'd been kind of tobered by the board, like remember who you're speaking to, kind of thing.
Yep.
Rather than. It's so short-sighted from Rodgers because I think a big part of what he came back for was to rebuild his reputation, whether that was within his kind of family circle, because I know that I do believe that he does have some affiliation with Celtic, but he sort of all the ire the last thing this has been building for years, and people say, "Oh, you're entitled," but I can't ever remember a time where the Celtic support liked the board.
Nope.
Back to '94,
didn't even like Fergus saved it, and people. But
yeah, you have that sort of disdain, and he could have saved himself, but it's so hard now because I think I've been fairly fair with Rodgers since he came back. I know some people really haven't taken to him, but he doesn't help himself with comments like that. And as you say, to say that they bleed for the club, the people who bleed for the club are the people who pay week in, week out. And these guys, they just take. I remember seeing something on Twitter during the week that I think, is it something like 28 million or something like that Peter Law was taking out of the club since he came. And I think the point you made, Stu, the way the processes, I say that in inverted commas, are, these have been done, they've all been set up by Law doing Dermot's bidding. He micromanaged everything. Like, if you think back to when Law was here, he was like your de facto director of football.
Yeah.
And all those processes have been sort of narrowed, and then he just selects the people, drops in Nicholson because he'll just do the exact same job that Law was doing.
Never be the smartest person in the room, and that's something that these people don't understand.
The notion of bringing in someone like Paul Tisdale, I think that's evidently not worked out, and there's rumour and conjecture about his relationship with Rodgers, his relationship with Desmond. It's pretty clear just from some of the stuff that the manager's doing with the team who his players are and who his players aren't. But the notion of bringing him in is that he should be front and centre of all of this. Nicholson shouldn't be doing the deals. Nicholson should be running the football club and worrying about all the other stuff that Celtic are really bad at functionally. And there should be a footballing department that he's the head of, where he gets his budget and he's going to live and die by the decisions that he makes.
He's free to do what he wants with that budget.
Not that it gets fed through. I think that Rodgers' role in it is problematic. I have a modicum of sympathy for him with the fact that he's been shafted this summer, and he's had to toe the line between public facing, crying out for investment, and then, as you say, probably getting his knuckles wrapped behind, and also this being absolutely adamant that he's going to see out his 3 years, and so he can't just like burn it down. It's really uncomfortable.
But don't you think this was a chance for him to step out and say, I've been screwed over, the support are being screwed over, I'm not going to work in this environment because I don't think it's best for Celtic, and unfortunately I'm going to resign. I think everyone would have went, fair play.
Yeah. I think
he could have spun people on board.
He could have spun that. This is not good enough for Celtic and all that.
I completely agree with that, and I think that most professional. You saw Glasner more or less take that stance through the week at Crystal Palace over the Mark Gay transfer. I think people would respect that, but also so much of, and the problem with him coming back is it's all tied up in his ego and it's tied up with what happened last time. And the irony is that it is probably going to end up doing his reputation more damage than it's actually sort of healed, because he's not exactly come up and blown the doors off. And if you think that we nearly beat Bayern Munich is going to be enough, that's not better than an invincible treble, and it doesn't take away the fact that he sort of left in the night. So obviously him being removed would be an ideal sort of part of this as well. But right now, if you don't act on removing Lawwell, Nicholson, all of these people, they are going to select the next patsy to come in and do their bidding, and it will be Damien Duff, Sean Maloney, someone like that, because we have had exciting, progressive managers put in front of them, and Desmond went, no, go and get Rodgers. If you look at Iraola, if you look at Maresca, Farioli, all these guys that have come in and done quite exciting stuff, like Iraola especially. I mean, he's kind of had his team gutted this summer and still looks like he's a really, really kind of astute appointment. If you don't act on that just now, so you almost have to set it to one side, and I know that's really, really difficult, and I know that there's a lot of people that don't like Brendan Rodgers, and I think that the football at the moment is dreadful, and I think he's got a massive role to play in that. But I think you just have to really focus in on how you can apply pressure to these people to make change at the top level of the club.
See, just on the Rodgers thing as well, like, see if, I know I'm a sort of doomsday scenario perpetrator, but see if the wheels do come off and we don't win the league this year, and say it comes off and we know by sort of coming into May that the league's gone, his reputation is in tatters.
It's in the toilet.
Whereas he could have got everyone who hasn't liked him since he came back on side and thought he really took one for the team. Because I remember after the Kairat game he said, I just want what's best for Celtic. And if he had done that, he could have done that, his reputation would have been not repaired wholly, but he could have said, like, that's me, I'm taking a stand and I want the best for Celtic, and change has to happen. And I think history would have remembered him probably almost as much for doing that as all the success that he's brought.
Yeah. So the one thing I'll say about Rodgers is he looks like he's a little bit aghast of what to do next in terms of tactically, right? So I don't want to talk too much about the actual football game because we want to get back to the board stuff. But essentially, Liam Scales, 6-yard box defender, superb, right? Throws himself in front of everything, no bother. Liam Scales with the ball, steps 2 yards in front, passes to the opposition. It happened 4 times, right? We can all see that. That's been happening all season.
It's been happening for 3 seasons, Chris. But
it's been so stark this season.
Yeah.
And Rodgers hasn't changed it.
No.
And so in terms of Rodgers' reputation, I think I just think that it could potentially be very turgid. We still might win, but he's taken his future in his own hands here, because if Celtic weren't to win the league, if Celtic don't win the league, then he's finished.
Yeah.
He is finished.
Do you think football's moved on from his methods?
I think so. I mean, I think he's quite one dimensional over the last 2 seasons. I think a lot of great players have dug him out of it. I also think he deserves props as well. I think it's a 50-50 thing.
I think there's a wider conversation about where football has gone in general, because, there's lots of stuff about Pep Guardiola's ruined football and what's the next sort of thing coming through and where Rodgers sits on that. And I'm not really qualified to talk about that because I ultimately don't know and don't really care.
Do you know my biggest fear would be, this would be the doomsday scenario for me, and it's not about us, it's about Rangers sacking Martin really quickly and getting someone like Sean Dyche, who'll come in, he'll see a squad of players and he'll be like, how can I get the best at this squad of players, as opposed to, I have principles that I will only play to, these players will play to my principles. And that's the big concern. Right, in terms of the board, the biggest thing I've heard... I
just want to say one more thing on Rodgers, sorry,
that's all right.
I genuinely think he will be absolutely aghast at the business that's been done, and I think the last couple of weeks when he's been sort of moving square pegs and round holes and playing Liam Scales at left back, I think he's thought, let's just get through this and then I'll have my players and we'll go, and now he's literally got nothing. and also the fact that he hasn't gone now, he can't really come out and be like, the business that we've done is terrible, because what does that do with the players that have come in? And you lose them, you lose these players that are low in confidence, and he's really just sort of boxed himself in. So it has been quite badly mismanaged.
Friday, he what do you call it?
The Ida stuff, he completely undermined. And he's going to have to come out and go, well, listen, every manager would like more, but we are where we are, and this is where we have to go.
Do you think he's missed the cut-off point?
Yeah.
It really had to be Tuesday or Wednesday morning.
Yeah.
I think actually Friday, when he started talking about the border, blah, 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 bleed green, that's when I think he hitched himself to this situation. He was never leaving. And I think that's a shame.
I don't care what Brendan Rodgers' long-term reputation is.
Oh, yeah, who gives a fuck?
Him.
Yeah.
But
we won what's best for Celtic.
Yeah. In terms of, I've heard a lot of things. We'll finish on this, right? So, I've heard a lot of people saying, "What's the point of giving up?" Right. So, I've unsubscribed or unsubscribed. I'm no longer part of the Home Cup ticket scheme. It's the same with Christopher Boud. It's the same with yourself, Barry. It's the same with a number of cynics who are season ticket holders. We're all not part of the Home Cup ticket scheme. I know a lot of people who are the same. I've heard lots of buses have fully given up their Home Cup ticket scheme. People say stuff like, no matter what you do, you can't change it, so don't do anything. The fact is, every movement has started off with someone saying, you can't do that because nothing will change. That's how they get power, and that's how they keep power. Change happens when people unite together. And the fact is, if I can sit here and say, I've given up the Home Cup ticket scheme, I'm going to walk out after the first 5 minutes of a game, or wait 10 minutes before walking in. I'm going to take part in protests. The Cynic itself, we're going to start an email/letter campaign. We're going to get everyone to flood them full of really lots of different emails to make them have to answer. As an individual, I'm not telling anyone how they should be a Celtic supporter. If you stay on the Home Cup ticket scheme, that's up to you. What I'm saying is, we all need to divide ourselves and divorce ourselves of this idea of there's always someone ready to take your place, because the fact is, if you can do one thing, it will lead to change. You don't get, and we're not talking about Dermot Desmond getting usurped and leaving Celtic next year. Might not even be in 3 years' time or 5 years' time, but you have to start somewhere, and ground level support for each other, unite. That's how you change. And I'm sick of people saying, no matter what you do, nothing will change. Daniel Levy's just left Tottenham.
To say, that broke earlier on, that the years that Spurs fans had to endure with him, and I think he's been there for like 15, 20 years. I might be wrong. It's like Lawwell. And longer, suddenly they've just kind of got this, and you do see, I know it's not the best regime to talk about, but the situation at Newcastle with Mike Ashley, I mean, I know how they've bought it out, and it's not exactly the nicest thing for your club, but these things do change. Even the fucking Necker Rangers, I guarantee you, and it won't be a popular thing, their footballing systems and the way that the club is run will be much, much, much better than Celtic's, even today as we sit here. Yeah. Whatever you're seeing on the pitch, their recruitment, their scouting, you've even seen that from how they've been able to go about their transfer business, their willingness to spend money, their willingness to scout a player, see him, buy him, put him in the team. I don't think they have the right manager just now, but they clearly have an ethos, and if Celtic squeak by this year and they win the league, if they continue operating the way they do, Rangers will have a new manager, they will spend more money, it will be more competitive, and you're already seeing the regression in the last 6 months from the Bayern Munich game. If Celtic win the league this year, there's absolutely no guarantee that they win anything next year, and then we've seen how these things flip in Scottish football when there's financial parity, and we're not a million miles away from that. So I completely agree with everything that you're saying about protests, and for everyone that says, well, you're entitled, or I'm not doing this because the board have delivered XY trophies, that can go very, very quickly.
Absolutely, Stuart.
Yeah, I was just going to sort of build on that and say, like, I'm not convinced. I know that there is people on the waiting list, etc., but I'm not convinced there's this sort of large sort of breed of new Celtic fans willing to swoop in. You've spoken often, Gall, about the fact that the younger generation, they're kind of, you can see like a lot of some Man City and PSG strips, and I know that there will always be new Celtic fans, but
It's getting so expensive as well.
Yeah, I think the board could be in for a rude awakening, and like that. I think that unless things change, you're right. You can see that clubs in Scotland with far lesser budgets even than us and Rangers are starting to modernise. They're getting directors of football. They're starting to put processes in place. Tony Bloom, etc. at Hearts, and you see how quickly football moves, and we could be left behind. We're already starting to be left behind, but we could be left very far behind very quickly.
Yeah, so as an individual, you do what you think is right. I've given up my home cup ticket scheme. Barry's given it up as well. I'm not buying merchandise.
Can I just be clear that I'm not a season ticket holder, and so I'm not I'm not giving it up. So.
Yes.
You just slipped up 2 home cup tickets.
I've actually just got 2 home cup ticket schemes.
2 tickets for the Scottish Cup final before we were in it.
But as I say, like change looks impossible until it's not. And change can happen. It might not happen quickly, but it can happen. I'm not buying any merchandise. I'm not going to buy anything at the stadium. I'm going to try and bleed them dry. And the fact is, these people only deal in money, and that's how they're only going to change. And the power of the people is stronger than the people in power. And so let's always think about how we can change and affect change. We're going to, as I say, we're going to do an email campaign to try and just, overwhelm them, and to the point where they have to actually turn around and answer us. Final kind of point. This was comments from Michael Nicholson at the AGM last year. Well, the objective is simple. Our objective is to be a world-class football club in all that we do. At the moment, that means dominating in Scotland and competing in the group stage of the Champions League. And in order to achieve that objective, we organise our strategy amongst 3 key pillars. And the core central pillar of that is football and our football operations. In addition to that, we have a focus on improving the football environment in which we operate and compete. This was a year ago. And finally, and importantly, we have a focus on improving and growing the Celtic brand around the world. Nothing about the supporters. And those 3 areas are supported by our people across the business working together to take Celtic forward as far as Europe is concerned. That's just not true. The home experience of being at Celtic Park, we've had lots of listeners' messages and say, I went for a pie, they were sold out of pies. The walls are crumbling in terms of just, plaster coming off. It just looks stinking. So fuck them. Sack the board, Barry.
Yeah, get them all to fuck and do it soon. And it's maybe perverse the way I'm thinking, but I'm actually looking forward to the protest and seeing how much we can make them squirm in a peaceful way. Let me put that out.
And I will say something else, Stuart. During COVID, they couldn't. We couldn't get access to the stadium, so they had it easy. They're not going to have it easy with the home games because we will make ourselves known.
And let's start at that charity game on Saturday. I want everyone to give Mark Crossass hell. Get him to fuck.
See just
Crossass out.
See, just on that, I think we spoke earlier about the next game being Kilmarnock away at Rugby Park, and it's a horrible place to play football, but that one stand behind the goals, I think it's the perfect place for the chants and the singing against the board, because it's one stand, that steep stand, and you know what the away supporter like, so they're going to get it straight away from the next time we play football.
Brilliant. This has been an absolute joy. If you want more content, as I say, we do 32 podcasts a month. We've got writing that goes on the website as well. The Cynic.co for all your Celtic FC needs. Also check out The Cynic on Patreon. Do a wee search and that will come up. You can also email editor@thecynic.co if you want any details, or you can go to, we're on Twitter, we're on Instagram, we're on BlueSky at 90 Minute Cynic. Send us a message and we'll talk you through it. Stuart Duggan, a bloody pleasure.
Thanks very much. Sack the board.
Lovely. Barry Gallagher, speak to you soon.
CFC, not PLC.
Love it. We have lots of questions, which we will actually move on to the agenda just because we didn't get a chance to answer those questions today. But thank you very much. From Barry Gallagher, from Stuart Duggan, from myself, Chris Gallagher, this has been the Cynic Weekly. Sack the board! I'm on the hoops. And we'll speak to you down the road.